Hi, Michelle.
Hey Mel, how you going?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good. It's cold over in your part of the world and it's warm in mine, so it's yep, all good.
It's
And
yeah.
today in Australia, it's the day of the race that stops the nation. So the Melbourne Cup.
Oh,
I am not a horse racing fan at all, but I know that lots of the people that follow me and are connected to me are massive sports fans and horse racing fans. So I hope everyone has fun.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
don't do horses or gambling, so there you go. But
Yeah.
a nod to a big day in Australia.
All right. And you're right. It is cold here. It's totally sweater weather, so I'm bundled up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm here in on Watawurrung country on the surf coast of Victoria, and it's unbelievably beautiful. It's going to be about 29 degrees Celsius, not a cloud in the sky, so
Mm.
nice. And it's a public holiday for us, so it's all cool. Hmm.
And on this holiday, we're going to talk about one of our favorite things in the world, podcasts. So
We are.
let's break it down. I mean, for someone who has not ever listened to a podcast before, they're just like, I don't know, it sounds complicated. How would you explain a podcast to them?
A podcast is like having your favorite radio show or your favorite person that you like to listen to giving you some dedicated time in your ears, pretty much uninterrupted. Now there are some kind of podcasts that run ads and things like that, but it's a beautiful medium of broadcasting, of storytelling in a lot of ways,
Mm.
of information sharing that is very, very dedicated to the topic at hand. Um, and I think it's, I find I don't actually watch or listen to much broadcast stuff at all. So I like to choose what goes in my eyes, in my ears, and this is a really great way of choosing what you listen to when you want to listen to it and by whom.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point that if you are working to be more deliberate, more mindful about what you put into your mind and your day, podcasts are one way where you can be really choosy about what you put in, right?
Yeah.
So from a sort of technical perspective, a podcast is not streaming like radio is. It's not live. It's a set amount of time. It's one file unit, so to speak, for an episode, right? So typically an
Mm.
MP3, and you can access them from a number of different platforms. So you can typically access podcast shows from your laptop. You can go to a web page, but you can also get them on your mobile device through a number of different providers. And
Mm.
so, of course, if you're an Apple user, you've got iTunes. And if you use other brands of devices, you might be using something like Stitcher or Spotify to access your podcasts.
Mm.
So,
Mm.
Michelle, I want to ask you, when did you start listening to podcasts and why do you like them so much?
So, in a lot of things, when it comes to technology or all things technology related, I would consider myself to be an early adopter. That is not the case with podcasts. I was, and to my chagrin, which a couple of my friends remind me from time to time, I remember posting in one of my Facebook groups, I don't get this podcast malarkey. I don't, what's the big deal, And I think what had happened is I'd probably listened to one or two episodes and thought, I don't get this. It's not interesting, what have you. But I didn't understand how it worked. So I started listening. I can say that the very first podcast I listened to and then became religiously addicted to was a podcast by a group of women here in Australia called the Outer Sanctum podcast. Now, it's no surprise, it's about sport. It's actually about Australian rules football, but it's about, we talk about the inner sanctum versus, if you're in the inner sanctum. Well, these women they call themselves the Outer Sanctum. So they were the women who are on the outside looking in at the football industry and the football game and what have you. And I came across these women through my work in sport and in football, started listening to their podcast and went, oh my God, where has this been all my life? This is just an hour of listening to discussion that really engaged me. Then I found another one called Chicks Talking Footy, and then I found another one, and it just then I found business podcasts, because I'm a complete and utter nerd for business, and it just kind of spiraled from there. And I realised it was a way for me to get information that was really interesting to me by interesting people, on demand. And so I'm relatively young in terms of podcasting, only 2 or 3 years, I think.
Yeah, I'm a late adopter, I think, as well. Not quite that late, because I did start my first podcast in 2017, and
Yeah.
I'm happy to share this here. That my first podcast was called STEM XM, and I interviewed women that were in different STEM careers, and it. I was a baby podcaster. I probably wasn't awesome at it, but it was what I needed to do to get
Yeah.
better. And
Well,
I
you've
love
got to
it.
start somewhere, and to achieve
Exactly.
mastery, it's lifelong, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I learned a lot
Well,
doing it, and I fell in love with it. And now we make the Lead to Soar podcast.
we do. And what was interesting around that whole, for me, that from I don't listen to podcasts, I listen to podcasts. Now I'm a podcaster, was as part of that, when that sort of started to happen, I started to become a guest on podcasts. So I was a guest on the Outer Sanctum podcast. Thank you,
Mm.
ladies. I've been a guest on Chicks Talking Footy. People started to say, this is a great medium. Come and tell your stories and
Mm.
be interviewed. But then, of course, I'm a professional speaker, and I'm a professional MC, and I interview people on stage when we did live events. And people said, "You'd be great on a podcast." Oh, yeah, whatever. And then I met you, Mel, started listening to your podcast, and I'm going, hello, here's someone that could probably take me from a novice to perhaps someone who's less of a novice. Yeah, and I became a baby podcaster with you. And so, wow, in 3 short years, I've had this kind of massive evolution. And yeah, I'm just looking at I've got my podcast list open on my Mac here, and going, wow, I listen to a lot of podcasts.
Yeah.
But it's a bit like books, though, or you can pick up what you feel like at whatever, or music. You pick up what you feel like. You listen to what you feel like, whatever mood you're in. So,
Well,
but I do love our podcast.
I do too. So this is starting to change kind of in the industry, where some podcasts are going behind paywalls, but most podcasts are still free, and they come out at different frequencies. So our podcast Lead to Soar comes out weekly when we're in season. And well, let's just shamelessly plug here. I mean, Lead to Soar is meant as a resource for working women, ambitious career women, and we also believe it's a really great place for allies to learn as well. So we do lots of different types of episodes. Sometimes you're interviewing someone, sometimes it's a discussion between you and we're really breaking something apart or giving tips for your career. But what else would you want our listeners today to know? So maybe a listener who hasn't yet tried a podcast.
Well, I guess that I've got a fabulous client, a very senior client in one of my biggest client organisations, and she's a great advocate of mine. And she said to all of her, we had about 300 people on a call a fortnight ago around inclusion and diversity. We're doing an inclusive leaders coaching series. And she just said, and here's a resource for you. If you want more of Michelle, tune into the podcast, because it's like having her in your own special version of Michelle in your ears. And it's like having a conversation with her. So, we really investigate and interrogate particular issues that you have lived experience with, I have lived experience, or we have women that have lived experience to say, what is it like? We talk about having a shit boss. We talk about what it's like when you've got to go and ask for a pay rise. We also interview those really inspirational women who in all sorts of different walks of life and industries. So I guess if you want a bit more of us, and it's pretty we get a producer one, but it's pretty unfiltered, it's absolutely, from my perspective, yes, it's research backed, but it's my opinion on a whole bunch of other stuff. So yeah, I hope that people, if they want to know more about us, and frankly to learn as well, because the whole point of us starting and continuing the Lead to Soar podcast was to share our wisdom, because we know that not every woman, not every ally has access to on-tap resources within their organisations, or a mentor, or a coach. So it's a way of perhaps even giving people an opportunity to go, I hadn't thought about it that way, and perhaps here's a way, here's a couple of tools or tips for me to progress this particular matter for myself. So
Right.
it's to be in service of women and allies in organisations.
And it absolutely is. And we hope you'll check it out. So, the last thing I want to plug today is you mentioned inspirational women, and we've got one of the most inspirational women, Amal Youssef. She is a host with us inside A Career That Soars. And she joined us for an episode that'll be coming out at the beginning of December. So, if you get into your little app and subscribe, you'll see it when it comes out. And Amal has just such an amazing life story overlaid with a career story. She started out opening a business in a totally male dominated space. She sold that. She went to school. She's entered into big corporate America and is a leader now inside a major organization. And she's got fantastic perspective. So she's an
She
inspirational
does.
woman coming up, and I hope you'll check out that episode in particular.
Yeah, I love Amal's backstory as well. She's she was a young woman, a Somali woman, a black Somali woman who then, whose parents, whose mother is very, very politically active. She's lived in Dubai, as you said, became an immigrant in America.
Mhm.
So she's got this rich tapestry of experiences, and she shares it in such a great way and just gives great advice,
Yeah.
particularly for women who are not part of the majority in organisations, so black women, migrant women, things like she's super energetic and
Mhm.
calls it like it is.
Yep, totally. So there's our plug, everybody. You should definitely try podcasts if you haven't before. And there's so many different apps you can use. I'm sure you can find one that's user friendly, one that you like.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we hope you check out Lead to Soar.
sure do. All right. Well, Mel, we haven't done our signature sign off for a while, so we want you not just to turn up, we want you to
Show up.
awesome. All right. So for everyone showing up today on what is in Australia or in Melbourne a public holiday, good on you. But yeah, we look forward to showing up in your feed this time next week. See you, folks.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody.